We play and call it work.
Hello everyone and welcome back to MiniWarGaming. My name is Kitetsu and I am running you through the lore of Age of Sigmar. First things first, if you haven't seen the first two parts, make sure you go back and check those out. You get an overview of the story so far, and then we get a detailed look at the Age of Myth 2. This video is about the Age of Chaos, so there's a lot more going on in terms of combat and fighting, which is much more fun. But yeah, go and check those videos out if you haven't so far. MiniWarGaming is making an exclusive bat rep for this video, which ties into all the events you hear about, so make sure you go and check that out too. To everyone who has watched those first two parts, thank you so much for the support. It's been absolutely fantastic, and reading your comments is absolutely amazing. You know, that really is the encouragement for me to make these videos. But with that out the way, let's take a look at the Age of Chaos. When the Realm Gate Wars actually begins, and the Stormcast Eternals invade, Chaos are at the height of their power in the mortal realms. Basically, all of the realms apart from Azir have been overrun. The battle that Chaos have fought is all but won, basically. People have been corrupted or enslaved, the landscapes have been ruined, cities have been destroyed, terrible fortresses have been built around the realms, and the landscape itself is starting to warp and corrupt. The life essence of the realms is just disappearing, and the amount of demons in the realms is so high that the realms themselves are starting to kind of appear into these mirrored, twisted reflections of the actual Chaos realms themselves. This means that even the creatures and plants of the realms themselves are starting to just warp into these mutated, horrendous Chaos entities. In terms of the people living in the realms, what happens is that early on, some of these weaker-minded people see the power of Chaos and they get tempted to join forces with them. And it's basically the temptation of this unnatural and godly power that becomes too hard for them to resist. And you can almost see how this occurred. They knew that the realms were going to fall. You're seeing this unstoppable tide of chaos, and they know that there's nothing that could really conceivably stop them. If you had a choice between continuing your existence as a servant of chaos or just being absolutely wiped out, well, they chose to stay on the winning side, basically. And why would you not come out blessed and rewarded by the Dark Gods for, you know, the small price of betraying everyone you know? In fact, the Ruinous Gods take particular delight in seeing just how far they could strip away the humanity of these converts. They force them to perform unspeakable acts of violence on those who once called them friends or family, and sometimes we've even got cases of entire cities pledging themselves to chaos, and that is basically how great the temptation of these dark gods are. There's a reason that the Age of Chaos is also called the Black Years, the Reaving Time, and the Great Slaughter, and that is because it is a time of terrible brutality. We've got Aurochs and Skaven running rampant and unchecked. We've got the dead coming back to life, well, an unnatural form of life at least, and then we've got these unstoppable tides of mortal and demonic chaos forces, and at their head is Archaon the Everchosen. This guy is the greatest champion of chaos that has ever existed in the sort of lore of Age of Sigmar. Archaon has just always been a threat in this storyline. You know, he was bad in fantasy, he's come back and he's even worse. He was so dangerous between the story of fantasy and Age of Sigmar that even the Chaos Gods themselves tried to kill him, and when they failed, they instead decided, well, okay, let's bless him with all of these unnatural and godly powers instead, and they basically turn him into a demigod. He basically becomes their envoy of death and ruin, and it's Archaon and the hordes that he leads that ultimately lead to the fall of the realms. Only someone like him could actually bring about the fall of somewhere like the Realm of Light, which is no small feat when you consider the power of the elven gods that called it home. We end up with Sigmar retreating to Azir, sealing the gates and abandoning the realms for hundreds of years. Entire civilizations get lost from all memory, they're wiped from existence by these chaos warriors, and all the while we just have the chaos forces spending their time hunting down the remnants of civilization. There is very little opposition, but not all is lost. We've got scattered survivors, tribesmen, common folk, and there are many years of conflict before the realms completely fall. It's more of a gradual process, and in the early days we've got these enormous mortal armies marching to war against the demonic hordes, but ultimately the mighty cities start falling due to these horrendous sieges that they're put under. There are some temporary victories against chaos, but ultimately one by one everyone starts to fall to the darkness. Then you start hearing some of the horrific stories of entire cities being offered up as sacrifices to the dark gods. It's hard to explicitly state how horrific the violence and death was during this time, and it was only Azir that remained safe. The realms are transformed into a pretty unpleasant place. We've got rivers flowing with blood, we've got literal mountains of skulls built up in the realms, we've got enslaved people being subjected to unimaginable horrors, we've got cannibalism, murder, and if it gets worse, I'm pretty sure it was there. There are a considerable number of survivors trying to kind of resist and stay on the run, just being one step ahead of chaos. The problem is, if you did unite all of these scattered remnants of humanity, ultimately it would spell doom for the mortal realms, because after a while the momentum of a force like this would be broken due to the fact that the hordes of chaos are basically endless. Their reinforcements are not going to run out, they can always summon more demons, and all of the people are just mortal, whereas the chaos gods have got all of these blessings that they've bestowed upon their warriors, and yeah, it just leaves humanity at a huge disadvantage. That's why during the Age of Chaos, Sigmar begins forging the Stormcast Eternals. To be honest, the only one who seems to be doing okay for a long time during the Age of Chaos is Nagash, and that's because he's a true force to be reckoned with. It's only at the very end of the Age of Chaos that he actually gets defeated, and this is during the Battle of Black Skies by Archaon. Without going into too much detail about how this all occurs, Nagash and Chaos have a pretty long and hard fought series of battles which were called the Barrow Wars. During one of these nasty battles, the Battle of the Black Skies, Nagash was slain by Archaon, but his Mortarchs group together what forces they have remaining, and they reclaim the remains of Nagash and retreat into a deep part of Shyish where Archaon can't find him. Then Shyish gets overrun, and yeah, the great stronghold in Shyish of Nagash is overrun and is absolutely decimated. All that remains is a large crater by the time Archaon is done with it. But the destruction of the realms in the Age of Chaos is very widespread, so Nurgle makes Ghyran into an almost unrecognisable forest of death, sickness and plague. The Sylvaneth and Alarielle basically have to retreat to these hidden glaives, and a sea of corruption just spreads across the once fertile land. And yeah, it's basically just rotting from within, which is not very nice for the Sylvaneth. It's actually the forces of Khorne that end up the most dominant of the Chaos factions. They're the most suited to this senseless violence and carnage that sweeps across the realms. We've got obviously Khorne, the god of blood, and the Lord of Skulls, so in physical power he is the most powerful of the Chaos gods. But he's not alone in spreading his corruption across the realms. We've got significant forces of Chaos and Tzeentch trying to spread their own forms of corruption. Nurgle, as we said, focusing on Ghyran. Tzeentch is favouring realms with strange and arcane energies, and he ends up putting the most powerful aspects of his force and focus into the realm of metal, where he's hidden the strongest weapon of Sigmar. Slaanesh is captured and imprisoned by the elven gods after gluttoning himself on the souls of those who died during the end times. Then we've got the god of the Skaven, who's pretty much just running rampant across all of the realms, but definitely significantly helping Nurgle with Ghyran. So I've painted the picture. It's pretty grim, and then the next question is, how did this all come about? It's actually only halfway through the Age of Chaos that Sigmar retreats to Azir and seals the gates. So how did we get to this point and why? And basically it all starts during the Age of Myth with a period of time called the Red Century, and during this time the Chaos Gods are fighting amongst each other over over how they can take over Slaaneish's territory in the Realm of Chaos. At this point they don't really care about the mortal realms, with the exception of a few greater demons who realise that they can basically break through the fabric of reality and invade the realms. They only manage to do it for short periods of time, and they're normally kind of beaten back pretty quickly, but it's when the Chaos Gods stop squabbling with each other that things start taking a turn for the worse. The invasions then start getting more frequent and far more devastating, and this is when the Age of Chaos begins with the Red Sentry, and Sigmar brings his pantheon of allied military forces to bear against the Chaos Hordes. The battles are bloody and brutal, but with the might of his godly pantheon, Sigmar and his allies just hold back the forces of Chaos. If only Sigmar could have kept that pantheon together, then they likely would have kept the realm safe. The problem is that this group is held together by people that don't really have too much desire to help each other in the long term. They've each got their own unique agendas. We've got the elven gods who want to restore their own races to the mortal realms. We've got the Aurochs led by their god Gorka Morka, who's getting impatient with the lack of violence he can unleash. We've got Alarielle, who's just sitting there moping about the old world and all of the elves she's lost. She prefers just being in her forests in Ghyran to the meeting halls of Sigmar. You know, none of this pantheon is particularly well suited to work together, and ultimately things start going bad when Gorka Morka decides to invade the realms in a tidal wave of senseless destruction. The elven gods just abandon Sigmar to hunt down Slaanesh, and Alarielle just doesn't even go to any of the meetings anyway. It's actually Nagash that really messes things up though, and it's his betrayal that just totally allows Archaon to take over. So Archaon unites all of the Chaos Gods together, all of their forces assembled into this massive demon horde, probably the biggest one that there has ever been, and he invades into the realms. This starts the wars called the Nexus Wars, and he attempts to take over key strategic places called the All Points. The All Points are places between the realms that connect them all, and if you hold the All Points, you essentially have the ability to outmaneuver any army that you're up against. Archaon basically attacks all of these all points at once, and war envelops the mortal realms like never before. But all of these all points are very well defended, and they've got Sigmar and his pantheon defending them as well, so they're all fine until disaster struck in Shyish. This was the truly pivotal moment of the Age of Chaos, because at the Shyish Archway, the all point gate in Shyish, the forces of death suddenly turned on Sigmar's army. Why would Nagash betray Sigmar? Well, some believe he made a pact with the Dark Gods to spare Shyish from the invasions of Chaos, but if that was true, he should have known better, because the Chaos Gods just care nothing for the promises they make to really anyone, unless I guess they've submitted to their own ideals. In a bout of rage, Sigmar leaves his throne in Azir to confront Nagash himself. He turns his back on his duties to confront the betrayer that was once his ally, and in doing so, one by one, the all points around the realms begin to fall. He storms into Shyish in a rage in a battle that becomes known as the War of the Heaven and the Underworlds. He's blinded by rage. He's consumed with confronting Nagash and bringing him to justice. Nagash has basically just cost him the realm. Sigmar has had enough of his pantheon that's falling apart, and this is the nail in the coffin. He knew that he was going to lose his grip on the realms without the aid of Nagash, and now his grip is just crumbling around him. In his eyes, there was only one to blame, and that was Nagash, so he would do anything to bring him to justice. But Nagash keeps escaping from the clutches of Sigmar, even when the two of them actually manage to come to blows. Eventually Sigmar's rage calms, and he starts taking notice of the situation occurring in the other realms. But by this point, it's all but too late. The all points had fallen into the control of Archaon, and we've just got uncountable demons and followers of chaos pouring into the realms by now. So for Nagash, he then gets drawn into the War of Bones, which is the invasion of Shyish by Archaon and the Skaven, and this grinds to a stalemate due to the immense power of Nagash and his forces. But the point that Nagash basically loses is when Archaon personally marches into Shyish through one of the All Gates and basically just beats him. Nagash has been weakened by centuries of war by this point, so he didn't really stand a chance. As for Sigmar and his retreat to Azir, there's this immense conflict that ensued shortly after Nagash's betrayal called the Battle of the Burning Skies, and Sigmar and his alliance confronts the main bulk of Archaon's forces. The battle was initially swinging in Sigmar's favour, but as Archaon descended to the battlefield, Tzeentch tricks Sigmar into losing his hammer, and therefore he becomes weaponless. He knows that the battle's over, he retreats, and then shortly afterwards the Nexus Wars begins and Nagash's betrayal occurs, so Sigmar has no choice but to round up what's left and retreat to Azir. He then seals the gates for about 500 years to plan his counterattack. And that is basically where the true bloodshed begins in the Age of Chaos, and the realms are subjected to a terrible time unlike any other. I'm going to leave that story there. Like, there's plenty more to say, but I've probably gone on a little bit too long as it is. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Don't forget to like it, don't forget to subscribe to MiniWarGaming, don't forget maybe to go and check out my channel as well, Kitetsu, link in the description. And of course, don't forget to check out the exclusive battle report which will be in the vault based on this video. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys really soon with the next part.
We play and call it work.